afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Friends. Today we're going to have a conversation with three siblings that left a Mennonite church at various times. And I would like to remind everybody that the guests on our live streams reflect a diverse set of values, morals, and ethics that may not reflect the morals, values, and ethics of the misfit Amish. Coffee with Friends may also discuss trauma of all sorts to include all types of abuse. Viewers and listeners may find it unsettling and triggering. If this live stream causes you distress, please cease listening until you're able to listen again. You may also seek support from your trusted folks and qualified mental health professionals as needed. Welcome to the show, and I'd like to say hi to the Weavers. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? And do y'all want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Grace. I'm the oldest.
And I'm Kay Rose. I'm the second.
And I'm Joe.
Well, hi. Are you the youngest, Joe?
Well, the youngest here. He would have been the fourth in our family.
We have one brother between
Joe
and
us
me.
two.
Oh, okay. So I thought it was interesting to know each of you a little bit and some of what each of you has experienced. But I wanted to ask, what type of Mennonite y'all were born into or raised in, and then if you don't mind telling me a little bit about that so we can understand more, because I know all of you speak some form of PA Dutch, right?
Yes, that we would have got from the Old Order of Mennonite, the Joe Wenger group, which is what we would have been born into.
Yeah.
But the church we would have left from, or we can just talk a little louder too.
Yeah.
The church we would have left from is the Nationwide Fellowship, so they would have spoken English.
Yeah, they wouldn't have spoken Dutch at all.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
They would have, the Nationwide would have preached in English. The Joe Wengers would not have. They
would have had the low, the High German in the church and what they'd call the Low German, I guess. No, they would have used Low German in church too. Yeah.
I think maybe there's some kind.
I remember some of the services. I don't remember.
Okay.
Is some issue here?
Yes. I'm having trouble hearing you. There's a little bit of lag when Joe speaks. Like he might be too far away from the microphone or something.
Did you want to all come over here?
We can see if we can move a little bit louder.
We can move it a little closer to it.
We can just try and speak up.
You want to just scoot over a little? I'll scoot over. There. Can you hear us a little better?
Yeah. Is that better?
I think that sounds so much better. I guess we'll see if our listeners can hear you better too. So somebody is asking, did the Joe Wenger group preach in German? And I think if I heard correctly, what Grace was saying is that they preached in German. Yes.
Low German, more of the Low German.
But I think some of the younger preachers started preaching more in Dutch. They had more Dutch mixed in.
Well, yeah, the Pennsylvania German dialect, was a little different than the actual German that they preached in church. So it was kind of like two different dialects what you use for your.
Yeah.
But it's very similar still.
So you had your.
Are we still lagging?
Yes, you're still lagging a little bit. But that's more about internet connectivity than anything else. But so if I'm hearing correctly, what you're saying is that you had your Pennsylvania Dutch dialect that you spoke at home, and then you also had to learn English.
Yeah.
And then in church services, they would have preached more in like German, like
Yes.
Yeah.
like High German dialect, like like this little New Testament
Yeah.
German, which is really interesting because that's what it was like in all of the Amish church services that I went to. Like we spoke Pennsylvania German, we learned English, but then we also had sermons in High German.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Old Order and Old Order Mennonites and the Amish were the most similar of the two groups I've ever seen, but there's some groups of Mennonites that are more similar to the Old Order.
Yeah.
The Amish. Yeah.
So Ruth asked, did you own English or German Bibles? I know you were small kids, so it's okay if you don't remember.
We would have had German Bibles until we went to the Nationwide, then it was all English.
Yeah, so I was like 5 when we went to the Nationwide. So that's most of what I remember is the Nationwide, the Old Order and everything. That's all. I remember some of it, but I was pretty young.
I was 12
I would have been
when we
almost 11.
when we went to Nationwide.
Yeah, but I do
So
remember.
I do
that
remember some of the German.
We
the
had
Old Order.
German Bibles. I remember that.
Okay.
I remember we had some Bibles, that were German and English in the same. Like they had 2 columns, one column of German and one column of English.
So
Still like
so you were reading the Bible and you had a variety of different types of Bibles?
Yeah.
Okay. So then what about your education? Where'd you go to school at? Like, did y'all have parochial schools? What kind of schools did you have?
we would have started. Well, I was the only one probably that went to the Old Order school. Yeah, because I went to first grade in an Old Order parochial school, but after that we were homeschooled till we went to the Nationwide, and the Nationwide required that you went to their church-run schools. So that's where we would have gotten the rest of our schooling from.
And how many grades of school were you allowed to have?
8. Yeah, just 8.
So what did the curriculum look like? Like, what are some things that you learned in school?
They used rod and staff.
I think it was only rod and staff.
Yeah, that was all they would use. They wouldn't even consider anything else.
That was like written by the
Nationwide people.
I think it was by the Nationwide people actually that they wrote those and published those.
And then they had like the normal math, spelling, science, history. Oh, and then they had Bible. Remember that?
The Bible study. Yeah.
The books literally said Bible on it, and it was
considered a course or a curriculum.
Yeah.
The curriculum, yeah.
Wait. The only books that I ever saw growing up were like with like Bible on it. It was like Die Heilige Schrift, and it was like an actual Bible. Like, what's in this book that's called the Bible?
It's like an actual workbook, like
you read a portion of scripture and then you answer all these questions about the portion you read.
It almost used the Bible as the textbook
Yes.
and that as the workbook.
That's exactly how it worked. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
You had a course in school where the Bible was your textbook, and you had studies specifically about.
So you say you had science. What kind of science did you learn?
It was all written by the Nationwide, so like every single thing was about how it
was like
ordained and created by God and stuff. But
yeah, like it was some about science, like the different molecules and atoms and all that kind of stuff. But when you were younger, like I would have started in the 3rd grade, I think. Their science was about, how you should brush your teeth and how you should.
Well, that's more like a health class then, yeah.
They called it their science, though.
Yeah. For like the first couple grades, they called like their science class and stuff was like health and kind of a mixture of it.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I'm
For the
I'm literally in awe.
grades, they had, so the one book was health, which that just, just the daily life to life health, I guess.
It was more
It
like
was
a
also
the daily
like,
stuff,
and it
yeah.
wasn't really, from what I remember, it was like teaching different manners.
and it was all
different-
written by Rod and staff,
Yeah.
so it was all every single thing was
It
about.
was stuff of like also saying please and thank you.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
it was normal stuff, but everything was ingrained with living your life for God and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was every
Everything
single
had
thing.
that
Every
in there.
lesson was geared toward that. They had the basics of like your science, social studies. They had your basics, health class, whatever, but it was all mixed in with
Well, like
scripture lessons.
even like their math book, you had Bible verses and stuff in your math book.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you had when you had these
all your word problems were about
all
the
your
Bible,
word
yeah.
problems were Bible stuff. All your I don't know.
Who determined what curriculum was allowed?
But that was just kind of a set standard in the nation.
That was kind of like the thing
The
that they
only
always say.
thing-
We always did it this way, so why change it?
It was the only thing. I mean, like in the old order, then each parochial school would have kind of been run by its own school board. It wasn't run by the church, really. So there was much more variance between those schools because it was each individually, and sometimes it was like not just the old order, it was also like the Horning or Amish in some areas would have gone together to make one parochial school. So it wasn't really run by one specific church. It was more of a group of people, and so the curriculum there was a lot more leeway. There were some more secular curriculums used in some of those schools.
I mean, I'm just gonna say, like, out of the 5 Amish schools I went to for my 8 years of Amish schooling, I don't think I ever had a math book that had Bible verses in it. I never had arithmetic with Bible verses in it.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what kind of curriculum you guys would have used, or was it all more of your own?
So we would have had like there would have been a school board. For us, it would have been a school board. In some places, they have the Amish Book Society, and there's another. I have it written down somewhere, but the name escapes me. But there's certain like governing organizations that kind of like oversee some of Amish school curriculums. But for us, because we didn't affiliate with like Lancaster Amish so much, we actually felt like they just lost their way with like how sometimes they did their things. But that's one of those things where we kind of like, I want to say we almost sin measure within plain groups, like which one is better and which one is worse. Like we talk about the lower ones as if they're worse, and we talk about what we call the higher ones as if they're better. But at the end of the day, they're all people, right? And people have people needs. But the church districts that I lived in, like they would have went together, whether it was like 1 or 2 or 3 church districts. They had a school board, they had the school, and then they picked a teacher and whatever. And so like the ministry, of course, would have like the overall overarching authority, but the school board would be responsible for approving the curriculum. So we
similar to the old order.
Yeah.
The order group, we would have had the nationwide, someone that's more, much more specific about their curriculum.
Yeah, that's better than thou attitude.
What?
The better than thou attitude.
Yeah. Remember, we used to go Christmas caroling to the Amish because they were lost.
And we used to talk about y'all singing in harmony. You know that 4-part harmony. It's a slippery slope, leads you straight to hell. Isn't it entertaining how we came from groups that specifically looked at each other as if their sin was worse than?
Yeah, we all, like even the old order, they believed.
I don't remember.
The old order, I think the nationwide for us were worse. They just every group, nitpicking every group and the way they did things, like they were so much better than everybody else that dunked, for baptism.
Yeah.
Was terrible. That was the worst thing.
Wait. Hold up. We were nitpicking. Did you just say the nationwide were nitpicking groups that dunked for baptism?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, and they had a very specific way in their baptismal instructions that explained why pouring was the best method to baptize.
But their theory did not make any sense. They poured because it rained on Noah's Ark.
Yes, that was one thing that they came up with.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was one of the things they used to justify pouring was
So
raining on Noah's Ark.
So, but people who baptized their members by dunking were wrong in the way they were baptizing people.
And they even, they explained the way, where, Jesus went down in the river, or whenever in the Bible, they go in the river or somewhere to baptize Jesus. Well, they didn't have to be dunking them. They could have been picking up,
They might have picked up the water with their hands and poured it over Jesus' head. There's a chance they didn't actually dunk him in the water.
So I mean, I guess us Amish, we believe the same thing in some context because we did pouring baptisms. And then
they were wrong. The order are wrong because they took the women's coverings off and they poured the water on. The nationwide, you left your covering on and you poured the water on top of the covering.
Oh, but I was baptized with the covering taken off. Were we wrong too?
Yes, according to the nationwide, that was very wrong. Because you should have probably been praying at the time that you were being baptized. So if you didn't have your covering on, you were sitting right there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, because you accidentally had your covering off when you maybe would have been praying. Yeah.
We have a commenter that says Noah was baptized from above, so that was the only way to do it. Okay. But I will argue, though. I will argue about the not removing the covering because, here's the thing. If you are that worldly that you stiffen and starch those coverings that they survive, poured water on it, you've just lost your way and you're just bushy at folly for all.
That's just the way it was, looking at the groups looking at each other, just each one thinks they've got it a little bit more exact. They think they've got it right.
Well, according to Lawrence Martin, Athens will be up here in heaven and everybody else will be down here. So.
I'm sorry. Wait, please explain this to me. How does Athens get up here in heaven and everybody else gets down here?
They're somehow the most perfect church out there.
Yeah, they're the best church. They're the only church.
What makes them the best church?
I don't know. I guess they thought they had everything down exactly.
They studied the Bible and they figured out how God thought everything should be, and they did everything perfectly.
Do they still think they're perfect after?
Well, after you left, things kind of went to hell, so I don't know.
Yeah.
They started perfectness.
Well, you kind of broke the pattern, so.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, Olivia says, and us Baptists were worried about sprinkling versus dunking. I didn't even know pouring versus dunking was a thing. Well, Olivia, the many, many Baptists who invited me to become baptized in their church were really, really offensive, quite frankly, because they always told me I wasn't baptized the right way.
Because you weren't dunked?
Because I wasn't dunked.
Oh my goodness. But the sprinkling versus pouring makes me think, some of them even thought they were better because they poured more water.
Or they used a bigger glass. So when I was baptized, they used a little pitcher, not the big one. So there were rumors around that he didn't pour enough because he had to save some water for the next person. It would have been better. I would have been better baptized if he would use a the big picture rather than the small one.
It's more symbolic. It's not
Wait.
that way.
It's symbolic. I'm sorry. Always. Joe, you're killing me. Always with the symbolism. You can't do it right? Like it's always the right symbol. Like it doesn't matter if it was 3 drops of water, as long as you got that water and your covering was on, you were properly and holy and righteously baptized into the church. Is that correct?
Oh, and you should also pour all the time when they say.
Okay, you cut out. Say that again.
When they say in the name of the Father. Okay, am I here? Can you hear me? Sorry.
Say it one more time.
So when they're saying in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost, some people poured when they said each. When they said when they said Father, they poured a little bit, and so on and so forth. Some people said no, you should pour from the beginning to the end. You should pour continually.
And some people say you should only pour at the end, and some people, yeah.
Like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Some people think you should go
And just
the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, whatever, and pour all the time. And I guess some people you have to pour after you said everything. I don't know.
Well, so how old were y'all when you were baptized, or were you all baptized? Because I know some Amish people, like, we leave the church and we never get baptized. Some of us.
Yep.
So how old were you when you got baptized?
Yeah. The nationwide was for baptism a little younger too.
I was 16.
I would have been 15. I think.
I was 14.
You're 14.
No, I think I was 14 when I became a Christian. I was 15 when I got baptized.
Yeah.
What's the difference between becoming a Christian and being baptized, Kay?
Well, okay, so the nationwide had this thing where at some point in the teen years, you reach the
preteen.
Yeah, sometimes it's
11.
You reach the age of accountability. So at that point, you got to decide to become a Christian.
I think it always happens at night.
And you got to go talk to your parents or the preachers and pray with them and become a Christian. And at that point is when you can start instruction for baptism, when you become a Christian. So you're not actually, I don't know.
So y'all have to go, and you have to tell your parents and the ministry that you're a Christian now. Like, you have to go announce it. Like, it's like a whole thing.
It's a whole coming of age ritual, basically. Where,
but see, their groups are also a lot smaller. So in my instruction class, there were only 3 people.
Yeah, and then they don't have a set time of the, like the old order would. They don't have a set time of the year when they baptize their instruction class or whatever. They have, whenever they have enough new Christians together to run a class, sometimes they'll do it for only 1. Sometimes, as long as they have 2 or 3, they'll run an instruction class, and after that instruction class is done, then you get baptized.
It's usually almost a full year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's every Sunday morning you meet with the ministry until you're done with this booklet.
What booklet? This one? Called Confession of Faith?
Remember, they don't like anybody else's writings.
Staff one.
It's one that they wrote because nobody else can write it right.
Oh, well, ours is this one. I'm just confused. Like, you have a whole year-long baptismal instruction. So do you have church every Sunday too?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Sunday evening and Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
And do you have church houses?
Yeah.
Even in the old order Mennonites? Did you have church houses?
Yes, do have church houses too.
Wow. So,
but the
Ruth says rod and staff confession of faith. What? I would love to read it.
Yeah, it's called, I'm pretty sure. It's like a little town.
Well, I don't know if it's called
think that's what
Confession of Faith?
I'm gonna find it.
Because
I think it's
I can't remember what it's called.
I'm gonna find it.
But it's a little yellow book that they wrote specifically for instruction class.
Oh, so they have a whole this is like, what would happen if some of y'all were to go read material that isn't approved by your parents or the church, like secular content, for example?
Well, that was more by each family, I think. It was up to each family how they handled that.
Yeah.
well, you didn't really have any access to anything outside of the rod and staff or like pathways or stuff
Well,
like
like
that.
school and church instruction would have been controlled by the ministry more, but at home, it would have been up to your family more or less what kind of curriculum or material you could read.
Gotcha. So they could add to it. So there was like a whole curriculum, and y'all were all baptized. And I mean, like you had this golden, as somebody said earlier, you had the golden age of accountability, the golden age of accountability, when you know right from wrong, right? You're supposed to be able to make a decision, all that stuff. Follow the expectations of conformity. That's what I'm hearing, is like y'all were expected to do this thing, to be a good Mennonite. You had to become a Christian and then go take your baptismal instructions using the right curriculum, the church approved curriculum, and then being baptized properly and gloriously with your coverings on, except for Joe. I'm pretty sure Joe got to take his hat off. Yes?
They don't wear a hat. They don't wear.
They don't wear hats?
Well, like, so some of the older guys, like from like Marcus Knowlton, just like from that moved to the nationwide from another group and something, where like if they previously had wore hats in their previous group, like sometimes they carried that over, but the nationwides, no, they don't wear hats.
At least a requirement.
It's not a requirement, no.
It's not a requirement.
Loose with their, I don't know, we're lagging again.
They're more relaxed with their rules around men's clothing and bodies.
Well, you can choose more. You can choose to be more conservative, essentially, in the nationwide church. Some families, will choose to grow beards or wear hats or something to be more conservative, but it's not a requirement of the church to wear a hat or grow a beard.
So like bill caps there, like if they had any logo or anything on it, like a business logo or anything on it, you weren't supposed to wear that, but like a plain bill cap,
yeah, you could wear
that.
You could
but
wear
not
bill
to
caps,
church.
but not to church. Just to
And also, if you like grew a beard and you decided a little while later on I'm gonna cut it, then they would have an issue with it.
Because you have to make up your mind.
Yeah.
And you have to stick to it.
I told Mom I want to grow a beard, and she told me no, I'm not allowed to.
I think they didn't want it to get too like faddish, like
Yeah.
they were really against fads and trends and stuff.
Okay. But like you were talking about the caps that you couldn't wear to church, but you could wear them otherwise. Was it like a case of like out of sight, out of mind?
Maybe, because they were also allowed to like wear tan pants, like khaki pants outside of church, but not to church. And you were allowed to wear like
It's just not quite holy enough for church, I think.
Yeah.
It's not quite. You had to be perfect for church, but you could be a little bit.
But
men were loose on through the week. Women still had to wear all their black socks and everything like that.
So like
that's my
so like
men got. Oh, I have to show your album.
So were women allowed to wear pants?
No.
No, women were still supposed to dress, almost exactly like you would to go to church.
Oh, and remember when you washed your hair and you were outside playing with a handkerchief on your head and it got preached about on Sunday morning?
Oh yeah, we weren't allowed to coverings. Or sometimes you were allowed to wear white veils, right?
Yeah, white veils or your actual coverings. And you were wearing a red handkerchief. That was terrible.
They preached about that this morning. I remember it.
That wasn't really about me, though.
I don't think it was specifically about you.
It was Enos Hurst was preaching about an Amish woman that he saw outside.
Yeah, but it
with
was
her hair down in a handkerchief, and that was very terrible.
But the reason we talked about it was because it was Saturday that you were outside and he drove past, and the next Sunday
I think we're lagging again. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was Saturday. It was Saturday, and Grace was outside with a red something on her head, right?
I swear that was not me that he was preaching about. But an Amish woman
in his sermon, it was about an Amish woman.
In his sermon, he said an Amish woman.
Okay, well, let me just tell you something, okay? If I wash my hair and I put on a cupdo and went outside, I don't give a flippity flap what some Mennonite preacher thinks about me. If my hair hasn't dried, I'm not going to put it up because it will not dry for the whole week because it's so long. So don't even get me started.
Stay away from the house and out of the sight of men until that happens, until it's dry and it's back up in your covering.
You're supposed to stay in the house and out of the sight of men until it's dry because what? Because it incites men to lust? Is that the problem?
I guess. I don't know. I don't know either. Some of the rules I don't know really almost the reason behind it. You can figure it out a little bit, but it's hard to tell.
You can ask about it and they'll tell you, well, this is the way it was always done.
Well, but how old were you, Grace, when you were outside with your red, glorious Jezebel head covering?
I don't know, like 16?
Probably.
So again, some of the sexualization of minors but he used an Amish woman to say that, but it was specifically designed to teach Grace a lesson. Did you learn your lesson though?
No.
No.
They also, the nationwide were different because they allowed. Oh, our mic keeps cutting out.
I don't know. You can keep talking.
Give me my tablet. I'll try setting it up on their ones, and while we keep talking. Oh, never mind. I'll go get it. You guys keep talking.
Okay, what were you saying? What were you talking about?
Oh, about the pigtails.
Oh, yeah. You had to keep your hair. You had to keep your hair in two. You say it.
Yeah. So the girls, before they became a Christian, they needed to keep their hair braided like in two pigtails. Not one. It had to be two. Why was that? There was really Rhonda Byler was the only one who they allowed to have one.
Well, Rhonda Byler was also almost 20 before she became a Christian.
Yeah.
And everybody was super concerned about her. But then I think she braided her hair in one braid by herself. That was very, very wicked for some reason. But, yeah.
So that was very wicked. Like you're talking about the two braids. So why are two braids holier than one? And I'm sorry, like until they became a Christian, like what?
After they became a Christian, they had to wear a covering.
Then they had to wear a covering. But didn't Nationwide wear those little worldly coverings that they might as well not even wear them?
Ours were not little.
Oh, but they by my standards.
You have to put your hand like this. If your hand was, if the covering did not touch your hand, then it was too small.
If you put a butter knife in front of your hair or two fingers and your covering didn't touch it, it was too much hair showing. So I don't know what y'all talking about. Like the whole hand. That's a big difference.
But we also did. There was also something specific about the way they had to curve. They had to cover your.
Well, they had to cover your hair behind your ear or by your ear. Like the covering had to. There wasn't supposed to be any hair showing at the curve, like around your ear. It wasn't supposed to cover your ear. The covering wasn't supposed to cover your ear, but nor was any hair supposed to show.
Okay, so your ears were not supposed to be covered, but ours were supposed to cover the ears at all
I know.
times.
It's the same as the old order. The old orders were supposed to like come down over their ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have
But
Deirdre
the
saying,
old orders, they weren't supposed to cover the ear. It was just supposed to be like top of.
Deirdre says, we were not allowed pigtails, though. They are the devil's handlebars.
The devil's handlebars. You never heard that.
Like, so like, I'm still amazed that like little girls didn't wear coverings until girls didn't wear coverings until they became a Christian. That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
You didn't get to wear.
Well, the old orders, they wore a covering to church over top of their pigtails.
See,
And
but
they started putting up their hair at a certain age.
Yeah, they weren't Christians yet, but they had to put their hair up.
see,
Well,
and in
I don't know.
and in the Amish churches I went to, babies were coverings before they ever had hair. And the braids, the way they braided little girls' hair, it was still the two braids, but they had to like pin it up in the back, and like they were never allowed to hang down the back. Like I have to wonder if like Deirdre is right, they were the devil's handlebars, but then I'm like, here I am talking to y'all, and I was led astray too somehow.
Our pigtails weren't supposed to like come out up here too. They had to go all the way down and hang right down your back. They weren't like pigtails coming out. Well, except for maybe very little girls. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe the little girls had them like further up, but I remember mom braiding them, like that. I don't know, but they were like straight back.
Yeah.
And then mom braided so tight that they curled. She was trying to tear our hair out or something.
Did you ever feel like your face was like pulled in different directions when you got done with your weekly braiding as a child?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also with their coverings. Then
Yes.
you got your hair all cut with the edge of the covering. Yeah. You had
I remember then. Okay, so you had to have either you had no part or you had the part in the middle. And I started putting mine on the side of the head, and then I would make it puffier yet, and that was very sinful.
Are you saying the higher the poof, it wasn't the closer to heaven you were?
No.
Do you mean you weren't getting closer to the Athens heaven like with that poof? Okay.
I guess not. I guess we ended up at the bottom.
Okay. Well, so I mean, I guess like if all of you were baptized and now all of you are out here, like I'd like to keep moving on so we can have a timely discussion. But like, why were you were baptized? You already told us why you were baptized, and if you like when you left, like why did you leave? If y'all feel like sharing why you left, that would be.
I guess I was the first one to leave. So there were a lot of reasons, really. I guess I tried really hard to fit in. I think the biggest thing for us was probably we were just too much of the odd ones out. We were like on the bottom rung in the church because we came from a different background. We came from the old order Mennonites into the nationwide fellowship. So we were the bottom feeders in the church. So we just didn't fit in, really. We just didn't fit in. And I tried really hard. Remember, I only wore plain dresses for a while,
Yeah,
and
you did.
I tried really hard to be fit in and be a good little Mennonite, but I don't know. After a while, I just didn't want to try that hard anymore, I guess. And I wanted to. And then I knew I wanted to leave, but I didn't know really if I wanted to stay away. And I just decided to leave just to try it. But I like cut off complete contact then. And I think it was faster and easier for me to like integrate then because of that.
You left without it being a big
Without so
drama on
much
you.
push and pull, with the family,
So
without trying to still please them. I just up and left and cut out contact. So it was a little. She thinks we're talking to her.
yeah. Well, then I left a couple months after Grace did, and I guess I never wanted to leave. My thing was always I was going to stay. I was going to get married and have a whole bunch of kids, and be a good Mennonite wife. But then I guess you would have to read my book really rather than me making a long whatever of it. But the reason I actually like moved out from home was because Mom told me I had to leave. I was being a bad example to the younger boys.
Why were you being a bad example?
Well, so I thought rather than leaving the Mennonites completely, I started going to a more liberal Mennonite church. And that was just me going to this liberal Mennonite church on Sunday mornings rather than going to good Athens. The boys saw me doing that, and that was a bad example.
Oh my, you started down the slippery slope, huh? Hey, Ruth said to Grace, when they refused to allow your younger siblings to get the special tutoring they needed, was that a breaking point for you, Grace?
It was one of the things. What actually happened for me was I just started clashing too much with the preachers, I think. Like they were trying to. I thought I could communicate what I wanted, or I don't know. I thought I could make them see my viewpoint, and it didn't work. And there was some issues between us. And I just said, yeah, I'm not even trying to do this. There were a couple things. What are we doing? There were a couple things that we clashed on. My laptop keeps like loading or something. There were a couple things that we clashed on. One of them was a weird health insurance thing. There was like when my parents did foster care, they needed some form from the ministry to show that why we don't have health insurance or like any sort of insurance, and that the church kind of acts as their insurance, so they didn't want to write anything up, but I kind of knew what my parents had written up with the old order, and the old order had agreed to it and signed it, so they would have some sort of proof. So I wrote something up, and the preachers found out that it was me that had written it instead of like my dad or something. So they threw a whole hissy fit and they wouldn't sign it because they wouldn't sign it because it was written by me, a woman. So through that, they also found out that that I was helping him with like when he had to do a topic in church or something, when he had to talk in church, I was helping him write up his notes and stuff because he had like a third grade education. He could barely read and write. I helped him write up his notes to like speak in church. And that was very terrible because I, a woman or girl, was influencing what was being taught in church. And then I also I got CNA training and stuff, and they threw a whole fit about that. And yes, the thing with my brothers that just kind of blew my mind that they wouldn't even accommodate them. And I felt it was because, once again, they were from a different background. They were foster kids, came into the family that way. I felt they were rejecting anybody that was different than them, or being almost cruel to anybody that was different than them. And I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't handle that, seeing that happen all the time, and I just needed a clean break.
Deirdre says, Grace, you are amazing. And also Ruth says, Grace, you should be honored. I'm sorry you were crushed in that way. I think that this is something that's very interesting to me, coming from where I come from. I heard Amish preachers preaching about the fact that their wives had to help them read the Bible in preparation for their sermons. So like maybe there was a different level of like control there, or even I don't know if it was because you were Mennonite, or because like that was your type of church, but that shouldn't be happening. Like, why can women all of a sudden not, like, they're just treated as if they're incapable of critical thought, or abstract thinking, or like even like having good information? Why does everything not only have to be filtered through a man, but also have to be something that it's only acceptable if it wasn't influenced by a woman? Like, do they hate women that much in that church?
I felt that in the nationwide, especially, the control of women was even more than the old order almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the old order women were allowed to do things that nationwide women were really frowned upon for. It just, yeah, I think now that I think about it, I really think the nationwide elders are cutting out again.
Can you say that one more time?
I really think the nationwide, yeah, I noticed we were cutting out, and I just, I think they just controlled women a lot more. And there were like 3 things you could do if you were a woman, and I didn't want to do any of them, basically. Was marry a Mennonite guy, work in a Mennonite business, or teach in a Mennonite school.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was your choices. And I didn't, after a while, I just realized I wasn't going to fit into any of those. I was just too different. And it just didn't work. Just didn't work for me. And I don't think I ever expected that I would stay out until I got out and actually started just realizing how much our viewpoint was controlled, and the things, just learning things that I had never been allowed to even consider before.
Yeah. I think sometimes when we get that like experience of maybe perhaps there can be a world where not everything about us is demonized or villainized or silenced or shut up. I think sometimes that can be really empowering, and then we make different decisions when we have access to more information and more experiences that actually honor and support us being authentic and whole the way we are.
I don't know why it's echoing everything. There we go.
There we go. Oh, that's so much
maybe
better.
We got better audio then.
You got better audio and it's not lagging.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully, if I can get this.
Hopefully it stays that way. But anyways, like it can really change like how you look at life and what decisions you make when you feel like you're allowed to make decisions, or when you're empowered to make decisions for yourself. And I think your life is kind of an embodiment of that, and I'm really glad you're here with us, Grace. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And
you left.
I left 2 years ago, so I got baptized at 16, and then like a week after my 17th birthday, I left. The reason, there were a lot of different reasons, but so like the preachers. So I worked at a Mennonite woodworking shop, and the bishop would schedule or would call my boss and see when I was on breaks, and then he would stop by while I was on break and pull me into meetings, and like a lot, like a couple times a week sometimes. And he would be trying to get information, for our family situation and stuff like that. And it just got a lot because I was only 16 at the time. And
I think that was also the whole thing of the preachers trying to pit us against our family is what pissed me off too, because they tried to do that with me and I would not bite.
Yep. They also tried turning us okay, dad's the good guy, mom's the bad guy. Oh, now mom's the good person, dad's the bad guy.
They kept switching that up all the time.
I think they kept trying. I think they recognized that our family was too different, and we were too much. We were too independent, almost in our thinking and stuff, that they felt they needed to split us up and pit us against each other and get us into their own little groups, which they managed it with Kevin.
Yep, they worked with Kevin.
They managed it with Kevin. So, I mean, he became a good little Mennonite boy, and he fits right in there. So, I guess they managed it with one of us, and the rest of us they pissed off and kicked out.
Well, one of the things they were going to send me to, because I guess I was a troublemaker or something. I don't really know what I did.
You weren't that bad.
I know. I never really understood
different.
why.
We were just different. That's the whole problem. We were different. We thought different. We acted different. We were different, and they didn't like that.
But they were going to send me off to one of those, I call them work camps now.
That's kind of what they are.
Religious prisons.
Just
Indoctrination camps.
I asked to be sent down to the Lamp and Light. So that one's one of the better ones. It's not even really that bad at all. Like the Lamp and Light publishers down in New Mexico.
Where they make rod and staff, right?
Well, they do.
Yeah,
do some of it.
Some of it.
They have their own curriculum.
Or basically, too. Yeah, that's another Mennonite curriculum that I guess not really rod and staff.
And then Enos Martin told me, the bishop, was that is too far away. I couldn't control you. In those words. And that was one of the turning points. I was just that's not okay.
Okay, but why?
Words.
Just because part of the human experience is being different. We're all different. Despite us all being different and having different experiences, we also have shared humanity. But being different is not bad. This is how we evolve as a society collectively. This is how we evolve. This is how we gain better.
That's what they want to eliminate and destroy is all that independence and difference, because otherwise their church system won't function.
Yeah, and may I ask why they wanted to send you to one of those facilities?
I don't really know. They told me my attitude wasn't submissive. I didn't know listening. I didn't think it's usually that they keep talking to the women to be submissive all the time, but
I'm sorry. So you were not
I wasn't
submissive
listening to the preachers, to what they wanted me to do.
You weren't obedient enough. You weren't being an obedient little servant of the preachers. And then the problem with the facility that you chose and wanted to go to, they said was too far away because the bishop could no longer control you from there.
Yes.
Did they also use language talking about the will of the child has to be broken?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That happened.
My kids, gosh.
I'm guessing that's part of what they're talking about there, Joe, is your will was never properly broken.
Yeah,
and
okay.
so now
I think they messed that up with all three of us. They didn't quite manage to get it broken hard enough.
They've never broken my will.
But then the poor younger ones.
But see, that was the thing. After you left, all of a sudden we were chained to the house and we weren't allowed to go anywhere without telling Mom exactly how long we were going to be gone and all of that. She like overcorrected the problem and we were all in prison in our own house and it was just...
So,
but see, Mom really liked me. I could do about anything.
I never understood that. How did Mom like you so much, but she was so much at odds with us girls?
I don't know. I know Dad told me pretty much every day that if there was ever an issue, I was the problem. And
then after
maybe
a while,
Mom was just overcorrecting that. I don't know.
Well, Dad hated you. I mean, that might be a strong word, but he
didn't like me. I don't know why.
There was there was a church thing there, but there was also a little bit of family thing.
Yeah.
When I first left, I was very quick to deny that there was any family problems or family issues with us. There was any sort of... I was very quick to deny that because I felt like the church had destroyed our family. I felt like it was all the church's fault for how we were. And I mean, I don't think it's all that, but I guess I always felt, for some reason, I just felt very... I just felt like the church had ruined it for us as a family.
When I talked to Paul Miller after I left and he asked me what the issue was, I told him it was a 90% church problem, 10% my family's problem. And I feel that's kind of how it is. Okay, so if it is more the family problem, it's because of what the church did.
Yes, the church like messed with our family dynamic so much that they kind of, I don't know, I think they almost kind of made my parents go a little crazy.
Yeah, they kind of did.
They just
think so.
Messed with our family too much. Well, that's the problem. We were the lowest on the rung there in that church because we were different. So we were the bottom people in the church there. So they focused all their time and energy on us, just nitpicking our lives and watching us, making sure we did everything right. It was just, they were always watching us. So it seemed like every other day it was something with the preachers. The preachers had some issue with us.
It was all of these meetings.
Oh yeah, they would even stop by and pull me into meetings, at home. Like pull me into their car or whatever, and we'd sit there for hours,
Like meetings because we wore a sweater to church on Sunday morning that had a zipper in it instead of buttons.
Yeah,
oh,
that was talk, me, right?
Yeah, they could talk for 5 hours about that.
I'm sorry, I can't. You wore a sweater to church on Sunday morning with a zipper instead of buttons.
Very nice black sweater, perfect. It had long sleeves, covered up everything.
Just
nice, but it had a zipper. It didn't have buttons.
But we have to have a 5-hour conversation about this with multiple men.
Yep.
Were y'all like 18 or were you younger than 18 when this happened?
Well, so the zippers, the meeting about the sweater with the zipper in was to do about Grace right after she left. They talked to Mom and Dad about it.
They basically had a meeting with them after I left, right? Yeah. About everything that I was doing
That Sunday,
wrong.
Paul and Ruth Miller were at our house the whole Sunday.
They talked about how they knew that she was wayward because she chewed gum in church on Sunday morning. She wore a sweater with a zipper in it. I don't remember. It was a lot of things that they brought up. Yeah. Yeah, they folded their arms about that one too. Yeah.
Let me tell you something about chewing gum in church, my friends. Chewing gum in church is the worst of the worst. It is the thing that I don't know why, but many dominant culture churches, they really have a thing against it. But in the churches I attended, it was a staple. It was a staple. We all did it because we had to. Otherwise, we'd be late. We'd be sitting in church sleeping on the backless wooden benches every Sunday.
I suppose at least you stayed awake then. And actually listened, right?
But the problem is
falling asleep in church.
Is anything I could have comprehended from that? I chewed it all up into pieces and then spit out the gum later so it didn't stick. That's the real problem. This has to be why gum is the devil's doorway.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but here's the thing though. It's like, so if like Grace was like leaving, like what I'm kind of hearing is that like the noose around your neck, like the rules and restrictions for Kay really got escalated to a much higher level once Grace left.
The rules and restrictions for you were a much higher level than when I left. Well, you want to hold this? I could kind of
so after Grace left, I think Mom just went, like over everything that ever happened in her life, and she was so worried about, what all she might have done wrong, and she tried to overcorrect, and it was just, Mom even talked about it, like that it would have been better if something would have happened to Grace, like she would have died and she would be buried there or something like that. Then she would at least know where she is. And she hopes that if ever anything happens to the rest of her children, it would be something like that. So she would at least know where we are.
I remember that.
Mom also talked about that she's willing to sacrifice her children if that means that the church changes some things.
Mom was dramatic.
Mom was very dramatic, yeah. Because then when that didn't work, like when she was always going over everything that we had to do and that we weren't allowed to do, and when that didn't work, and like I reported the sexual abuse that was happening and things like that, then she was just like, okay, well then I'm gonna just kill myself. And she just like went off the deep end.
There was a lot of that earlier too. Before.
See, I don't think we really saw it because you took care of it.
She just had a lot of struggles with that.
Yeah.
After you left, Grace, it got a lot.
She would remember the glider at the corner of the house by the laundry room.
Yeah.
She would sit there and pout all the time. If you couldn't find her, she was sitting there pouting.
I always almost felt bad for her though. Because consider it, if you seriously believed that if she seriously believes that us leaving like this, we are completely doomed, and if she really believes that, consider how horrible, how devastating, how depressing a feeling that must be for her to experience that. And I know she's a little bit, she's got other issues too from before, but just I think sometimes about how much that must have messed her up just leaving like that, especially since she was trying so hard to make us fit into that church setting.
Yeah.
She was trying so hard to be perfect for that church setting. And we just all kind of messed it up by leaving and making her a bad parent.
Well, yeah, because then they went back to Mom and Dad and said
because then it was all their fault. According to the church, us leaving was all their fault. It wasn't the church's, definitely. It was all Mom and Dad's fault.
Yeah. They said things like there are no good fruits coming from Mom and Dad's family and things like that. I do get what Grace is saying. That is true, yeah. It was just those couple months that I was at home after Grace left. It was... I don't know. It was just so suffocating, like everything we did. And if we didn't come home right away, Mom would be like calling us nonstop, asking where we are. I'm sure that's some because, when Grace left, she didn't say anything. She just left. So I'm sure, Mom was concerned. What is something? Yeah. But it was kind of freeing or whatever. I mean, it did hurt. But when Mom told me, okay, you have to get out, it was kind of like, okay, that was my permission. I'm just gonna leave then. Just like forget all of that. Screw it. I'm just gonna leave.
The one thing that I always want to ask churches like that who say, well, that was the bad apple tree, right? They say it was a rotten tree can't bear good fruits, right? They say that this was just that family. That's not really how the church is. But when they teach and indoctrinate people to believe that if, like, the sins of their children rests upon the parents, and therefore if their children leave their church that they were born into or they were being raised in, then it rests upon the parents, and the parents have failed and they're a bad tree, then whose fault is it really? Where does it come from? When the church sits there and teaches parents to love your children is to break their will, how is that actually showing love to their children?
Well, I guess then they would say they didn't break our wills good enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they would say.
Well, essentially they were punishing. I almost felt like my parents knew how to do it up to a certain point.
Well,
But I almost feel like they were punishing my parents, more liberal or forward thinking. You know, my parents were different than some families. They were different than some families in the things that, and I feel like they blamed everything. They blamed everything on the good things that my parents did.
Yeah.
yeah.
They punished everything that, I'm
They
not sure
made
how
my
to.
parents look bad for all the good things that they did.
Mhm.
Well, okay, so like they
While
let
they were raising
Grace,
us.
they let Grace do her CNA classes. I was working at a daycare center, you know, things like that, and that was giving us too much freedom, and that was bad, and that's why we turned out.
But
the way
at the
we did.
same time, some of those things did give us the opportunity
It did give us some of
to
the,
actually be able to leave.
yeah.
But the thing is, then they didn't really make us leave that way. They just actually didn't keep us trapped in there.
Yeah.
Other kids and other families might not have the same opportunities to leave as we did, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to leave either.
Yeah.
There's just not resources there for them to be able to leave. Because I mean, would you have left if you wouldn't have had anybody on the outside to?
No, so that was
help
the
you
only
out?
way. So, the way
Well, then-
I left was, I got myself a phone. I told my mom and dad that I locked the internet down on it, and I opened a Facebook account. And Kay sent me a message on like Monday evening, and then by Tuesday evening I had plans for her to come pick me up, and from there I left.
See, at first I was like, I'm not going to do it because you're on 18 and
Yeah,
I'm
I was
not
only
going to get in
17.
trouble for kidnapping.
I was only 17, but then I came to live with Grace here, and she got me enrolled in high school, and I got like my high school education and everything done. And then she also got like custody, so I could like,
I got,
because my parents,
legal guardianship.
yeah, legal guardianship.
So I could like
sign for
you for any medical things or whatever you were doing.
Just like mom, the little bit of contact I had after I left, I tried to keep contact up, but right now it's just a text every several months or so. My mom sends me a text every so often
to say that she has pies and cookies for us.
Yeah, that was the last time. She just sent me just a couple of days ago. She was like, she has some stuff out in the freezer room I'm supposed to pick up sometime. So I don't know.
Yeah, but you left because you were able to connect.
Yeah,
with us on
I
the
left.
outside.
I was able to have someone on the outside to help me out. Otherwise, all my jobs and everything were all in the Mennonite community, so I didn't really have anything outside of that at all until I got in contact with my sisters.
Yeah, I was able to leave because I was able to get a job outside.
Yeah.
Of, where I was able to have more basically, would you say, uncontrolled contact or whatever.
Yeah.
They didn't have the ability to control or filter the contact that I had with the outside world.
That was also with me. I worked at the daycare center, and I had people there who were willing to help and a job to go to.
Mm-hmm. So we were able to make contacts that way and actually leave, and which part of that was maybe my parents' fault, but
that
was
really
a good
fault.
thing.
It was a good thing.
It was a good thing, yeah. I mean, that they allowed us.
But that was something that they picked on.
But they would have blamed it on them then for allowing us to do that. That was the reason we left.
So Deirdre said that my parents had to pay a price when I left, and it almost sounds like that's some of it. Like when Grace left, that the parents had to pay a price with like the 5-hour meeting and all of that, and then also the other siblings kind of had to pay a little bit of a price too, and including with the ministry. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. And it also just really lowers your, what would you say, your status to have a family that leaves like that. It just
Oh, for a little bit you get all the attention and
Yeah, a little bit.
everyone's talking to you and everyone's praying for you, and then
They bring you meals as if somebody died.
yeah.
Yes, yes. And so then, like, that's like a whole thing. Like you all got out. Y'all are like working on building your lives, and you've been out for various years, kind of, sort of, in a way.
He's happy there.
Yeah, I've been. What has it been now? Like 5 years for me.
In September it was 2 years.
I think it's gonna be 5 years in January.
And it would be 5 years for me next. Well, it would be 4 years and some months, I think.
Yeah.
I left when I was 18, so that would be. It would be 5 years already. No,
you would be
4
closer
years.
to 6, wouldn't you, Grace?
Wouldn't it be 5 years in? It'll be 5 years in January.
What year did you leave?
I left in January 2020, so 5 years in January.
So yeah, I would have left in March of 2020, or well.
You left that soon after me.
Well, okay, so I started going to Sheldon in March of 2020.
Oh yeah, so you got to be wild Mennonite.
Yeah, I got to be a wild Mennonite.
You went out in stages. I went out with a bang. You went out in stages.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joe went out with a bang too. Just like, bye. Peace out. I'll come get some pies and some cakes or something, maybe some cookies.
If I feel like driving that far.
I just like that, and I didn't really have any contact other than them until Grandma's funeral. Really,
at Grandma's funeral would have been the.
But they made sure I couldn't see the little boys again. I haven't seen them since we're like.
Well, so I saw them at the family gathering after I left. So I was 100% out. Like it was in September of 2020. It was a family gathering.
Mom grabbed Jason.
And that was the first time I saw my little brothers since whenever. And I was sitting on the front porch holding my 2 little brothers, and Mom came and took them from me. And I was like, "Why did you do that?" "Well, I can't have them being around you because of da 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 da." I'm like, "Okay, bye, peace out."
Yeah.
I left shortly after that, though. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah, but
that was about the last we saw you around.
I haven't seen the only.
See, the last time I was at home, Mom told me if I ever come home again, if I ever step foot on their property again, she's calling the cops.
Why?
I don't know. That's just what she told me.
See,
and I was like, okay, it's okay for you to call the cops if I'm setting foot on your property, but it's not okay for me to call the cops if some frickin' whatever's happening.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
So when there's crimes being committed against you and you were a child, I've read your book. I actually have her book right here. If you want to know more about that, you can go buy Kay Rose's book. It's called Building with Dust and Ashes. It's on Amazon. I can put a link on the videos. But the truth is so what I'm hearing from you and knowing what I've read there, when you reported the crime that you experienced, even as a minor child, you're wrong.
Yeah.
But if you come around and you see your siblings, all of a sudden, it benefits them to engage with law enforcement. So what do? Manipulate the system for their own benefit and gain. And then they turn around and say, we can't report it to the cops because it's against our religious beliefs. But isn't that a little bit hypocritical?
They believe they could use the cops against you because you were no longer Mennonite. So they can't fix that within the church under the church umbrella.
But that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yep.
Because you were no longer Mennonite, so they'll use whatever they'll use them against you.
I would like to know what would really happen though if they would call the cops. Would the cops really do anything other than tell you, "Hey, get off their property and never come back"?
I don't think they could do anything more.
The only thing they could do is trespass you.
Yeah.
Just trespass you. What?
No, it's just like giving you a piece of paper saying you can't come back.
Saying,
oh, okay. Yeah.
A citation for trespassing.
Yeah.
They could give you a ticket, maybe even fine you. But yeah.
I think it's only if you go back after they say you're not allowed to.
Yeah.
At first they give you a warning.
I also stole money from Mom and Dad, apparently.
I made sure I didn't. I even paid them extra. Yeah, I gave them all my money that I had earned, and plus I paid them extra just so they couldn't say I stole it.
Okay, but y'all had jobs, okay? So how did you steal money?
Well, that wasn't our money. That was the family's money. We weren't allowed to keep the
I
money
got my
that we earned.
paychecks and they went straight to my mom. I had to sign it, and then she would write, on the back, her bank account information, and then put it in her bank account.
Well, see, that's the thing. I had a separate bank account because I was helping Dad with all of his financial stuff because my dad didn't know shit about financial stuff. So I was like, I would write checks. I would, balance his checkbook, everything like that. But then I had a separate account where I was putting my paychecks in it, and then I would use my paychecks to pay certain bills. When I left, I had money in that account, and that is the only thing that I can think of that they are accusing me of stealing money, because I did still have a couple $100s in that account.
Mm-hmm. See, I had a joint account with Mom.
See, I didn't. I was lucky.
So I just made sure to leave everything in there. Plus, I transferred more into there.
Well,
so
see, that's what I did then too. I did then. I transferred money back into Mom's account, and Mom called me and left a message and told me paying them money is not going to help anything.
Yeah, then they acted like I was trying to pay them off or something.
So I was okay, so...
She told us, like, when you send us gifts and stuff,
mm-hmm.
Mom would open all of that. Like, the younger boys, they did not know you were the one sending them.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, because I would have been 16 at that time. Or 15, 16. But according to her, that was you buying their... She said buying their love.
Oh, but see, that was another thing. You sent gift certificates.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote Mom and Dad's name and address on the envelope, and then you wrote their address in the return address label in the return address slot. And Mom she would laugh. Okay, I don't even know how to explain it because it was not like her normal laugh. It was like this sick cackle or whatever. And she would be like, "Yeah, she thinks she's really smart, not putting her return address label. I know who it is. I recognize her writing." It's just like.
But then when you did put the return address label on your packages, then she drove.
Then she would go,
yeah. Then she would go there to try and make me come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or no, she didn't really want me back anymore. She just wanted me to understand how badly I've.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was along for that.
It really those first couple times though, just meeting up again, that really kind of
drove you crazy.
I don't know. It was just really kind of tough. Because all she would do would be come and just look very sad at us,
Yeah. Well, see, that's why
and it makes you feel horrible.
I
mean, it literally makes you feel horrible because you think, am I really the reason for all her troubles?
Yeah.
I'm the cause of all her problems is me.
I sat against the bedroom door and just sat there until she went away, and then
I was sitting out in the car for that one.
Well, it freaked me out so badly. I didn't even know what to do. She came. Okay, so
she showed up. Mom and I drove up to to her job.
Yeah.
And Mom walked into her job, like her workplace. And
I went out the back way. I saw her coming. I told my boss who it was, and my boss was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of her." And she asked Mom, "Why are you here?" I sat in the back room and listened to their conversation. Mom was like, "I was here to talk to her." And Lori was like, "Well, if you aren't going to buy anything, get out." And she was like, Mom was just like walking in circles there. And then Lori was like, "Are you going to buy something or are you going to get out?" So then Mom left. And I thought that they actually left the premises. I was like, great, they left. So I went out the back way to go home. I lived right across the street. And they followed me home. And Mom came and knocked on the door, and I hid in my bedroom. I closed the door and I sat against the door and I just sat there. And then I called my landlord, and my landlord was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll call the cops." And then they just left. I didn't even talk to them. Well, I did open the door and I asked what she wanted.
Yeah.
And she didn't say anything. And so then I was like, "If you aren't going to talk."
Problem. That's the problem. That's the thing. That's the reason it's so scary or whatever, is because she doesn't really want to have
She doesn't want to have a conversation.
Reasonable conversation. Anytime I even try to think of things to talk, it just doesn't work. It's all she wants to do is to make us understand for sure that how terrible we're being. She just.
Well, at Grandma's funeral, when I tried to talk to her, she turned her back on me.
I think you guys had a different dynamic than us girls did too. I think.
Well, back when I was at home,
we
got along great when I was at home, but after I left, that changed.
I remember you really thought you could keep.
I really thought I could keep contact.
And I really hoped it would work for you. I really hoped it would work for you.
Yeah.
But after a while, I guess I understood even better why I left the way I did.
Joe, I'll never forget when I talked to you and you were so hopeful that your mom would continue to connect with you in meaningful ways despite you leaving the church and being out here in the world. And like the more that you've went through this journey of like building a meaningful life, I think the more we all have a better understanding of what has been motivating factors. Like, why would she no longer engage with you in meaningful ways? It's really heartbreaking when your parent that you thought would never ever do that does that.
Yeah, that's been one of the hardest things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always thought I meant more than that to her, but I think I do. She just doesn't know how to show it or how to, the difference between us now. Yeah. I don't really know how to explain it.
She just can't let go of. But I don't quite know what she expects of us anymore. Does she expect that she can make us come back?
That's what drives me crazy. I want to know exactly what she wants. Can't she tell us exactly what she wants, and then we could, say yes or no to it?
I just think she doesn't hardly know what she wants either anymore. Because, she wants everything back to the way it was before we left. But that wasn't great either,
It wasn't, no.
I think she just feels if we would have tried a little harder to please the preachers and just stayed on, we could have had the perfect Mennonite life. And I don't think she knows what she wants now, because us going back would no longer work. We'd still be. We could not integrate. We could hardly. We could if we became, but we'd still just be the oddballs out, because once we're out here, once we.
Well, I never really felt like I truly fit in anyway.
Yeah.
We were always the outsiders.
Yeah, we were the outsiders.
I found out
the
later.
Biggest thing. Sometimes I think we felt more belonging with the old order people, just because. Partly because we grew up with, my parents had all their friends there. We had all our cousins and friends there. We belonged more. We belonged more to the old order church than the nationwide. When we went to the nationwide, we just lost all that belonging, and it makes it very difficult to even want to consider anything that she would probably want of us.
Because she's still in that church, right? She's still in Nationwide.
Yeah.
Okay. And it almost sounds like when you went from one Mennonite church to another, you maybe didn't lose contact with relatives the same way as you would have lost contact with people still in the church when you leave. But
so like relative stuff we get contact with.
Yeah, but we just.
But you lost the culture.
Yeah, we just didn't. Yeah.
You lost that.
We were just more integrated into that culture. I think we just couldn't find the same thing in the nationwide, really, and they just held us at arm's length all the time, because we were different. We were from a different background. And sometimes going back to the old order communities, we still had a lot of contact with them, with our cousins, with families there. Going back to them, sometimes it just felt, I wonder sometimes if we would have made the break, if we would have stayed in the old orders, and if we would have actually had the, belonging in the old order community that we didn't have in the nationwide. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of a horrible thing too to think about for my parents, because they thought they were really doing the right thing going to the nationwide. They were saving us essentially, because they felt the old order young people were too wild. The nationwide don't have the wild period of the young people. So they.
Well.
Remember that?
Well, that I think that brings us kind of full circle to like if like the nationwide didn't have a wild period for young people. Was Old Order, the Joe Wenger, like the Tea Mennonites, like were they the type of Mennonites that practiced Rumspringa?
Yes, they did. They did. I mean, they called it Rumspringa too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
They called it Rumspringa. Yeah, they would have had the period. It wasn't really encouraged, or I mean, to a certain extent, it was, but yeah, you were allowed to do certain things before you became a church member, that you wouldn't ordinarily have. So yeah, they did have a Rumspringa, and the nationwide did not, which is why my parents went to the nationwide, was they wanted to avoid that Rumspringa period because they felt that was the most likely where they were going to lose us, right?
Yeah.
That was the most likely they were going to lose us was Rumspringa, and they didn't want Rumspringa, so they went nationwide, and yeah, I don't know.
You know, sometimes when the noose tightens around your neck, you find a way out.
Yeah.
And Ruth says, yes, Stumpen and Rumspringa. Yeah. Well, anyways, that's really interesting. And I think like we could probably have whole conversations about Rumspringa and Mennonite communities.
Oh, yeah.
And Amish communities, because some Amish do actually practice Rumspringa. Not the kind of Amish I was. We would have never. Those settlements, we would have. Oh, no, that's where it all goes wrong. But then, like, how do you rebuild your life? How do you have a meaningful life after all of that? Like, everything all of you have went through, all the things you've done. Like, how do you rebuild your life?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me has just been figuring out that everything that they didn't like about me is actually good things that I can use. And, like, they didn't like things about me being too independent or wanting to get an education and stuff like that, doing things that a woman isn't typically allowed to, or a woman isn't supposed to. And everything, all of that is now beneficial to living on the outside. And sometimes I feel like we deal with a lot of guilt and anxiety for doing the things that we weren't allowed to before, or but it just takes a little bit of figuring out for where you actually fit in the outside world too, and how to use the things that you weren't allowed to do before, yeah, I don't know.
Well, there's also the language barrier, the cultural barriers, because regardless of whether nationwide spoke Pennsylvania German regularly or used it for their sermons, it was still your first language, right? Like it was still your primary language.
Pennsylvania, yeah.
And English as a second language is something that makes the vernacular that we use to communicate different with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we escape or we leave a group like that, and we're trying to figure out the skills and the tools and where we're going to go and what we're going to do, you're right. You're 100% right when you say the things they didn't like about me are the things that allow me to shine here. Mm-hmm. That's like so on point. I felt that when you said it, Grace.
But the biggest thing I think is just having the confidence to use them, having the confidence to do the things that we weren't allowed to. And because you do, I mean, I've heard a lot about religious trauma and stuff, and it took me a little bit to actually identify with that. But there is a lot of that affects your daily life now. Just simply, there's a lot of almost subconscious guilt or whatever, because you're doing something that was ingrained in your mind so long that you're not supposed to. It's hard to feel comfortable doing some things. Mm-hmm. Even just the clothes you wear, the way you dress, it just,
these are not church approved clothes.
Yeah, it just feels sometimes So you can kind of get over it to a certain extent, but there's still that subconscious there. There's still
We
always
know.
that subconscious there that you feel like you're going against something that.
Yeah, and there are days that I'm walking around in pants and I'm like, oh shit, you better go change. You don't have a dress on.
And you've been out for almost, 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have good news to report on that, level K. I've been out for 20 years. Those days will get less and less as long as you challenge it. I can promise that. What about you, Lamar? Sorry, Joe. I'm sorry.
Okay. Probably so the biggest thing for me was probably realizing I can make my own decisions. I don't need to listen to, because growing up I always had to listen to my parents, the preachers, whatever they said, that's what I had to do. And after I left, it took a long time till I could, and it's only been 2 years, and I still have to deal with that. Realizing I can make my own decisions.
And actually knowing how to make them, probably.
Actually, yeah, how to make my own decisions.
Because, there's a lot of things.
I never really had that option before.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they don't teach you about how to live independently that you got to kind of figure out. It's just, it's really hard sometimes just simply knowing because there's so many things you learn in the culture that are very beneficial to us on the outside too, certain work ethics and such, but then on the outside here we struggle sometimes without having those rules and those things to guide us. I think it's one reason why a lot of kids that leave the culture tend to gear more towards, there's a lot of kids that leave that will do something like join the military or something then, because it's you need those rules.
Are you
need
stereotyping me?
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're that's right, you did, but I've seen it happen a lot. He's considered it, she's considered it, she almost went in. It's just something we feel we need the guidelines, the control, the rules. It's really hard to figure out exactly how to.
It's like
the choices and navigate life when everything was decided for you before.
And not only that, when you were taught that you're incapable of making good decisions and you have to seek out counsel and guidance from only church-approved people, it makes it very difficult to believe that you're even capable of making good decisions. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Joe?
And
yeah.
And
yes.
all the decisions you could make were governed by
the authorities. It's like when you're.
Now when you don't have that anymore, it's hard to figure out what's
the truth and what part of it was just them and what part is actually real life.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting place to be. But it's kind of like, if I may reframe that to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, is when I joined the Army, so we had Army regulations, call them the AR, right? So Army regulations, they literally have I think 75 pages telling people wear an appearance of the uniform. Reminds me of the Amish church rules letter.
Yep.
We had the Soldier's Creed, which reminds me of the Apostles' Creed. We had the other article, the articles, Rules of a Godly Life. Okay, it's a 3-part series that's when you have all of these rules talking about how you should connect with people, how you should not connect with people, and all the biblical justification for it. But within the Army, you also have your military bearing that you're supposed to have. You have drill and ceremony. They have ritual. They have all of these things that are parallel. And it's all about the control, the structure feels really, really, really familiar. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it makes it easier and it gives you kind of a soft landing place to some extent to where you're able.
For somebody else is still making
Yes.
It's not so hard right away to try and figure out what you're supposed to be doing if there's still somebody else choosing what you're doing, basically.
Yep.
Still somebody, it's just like you don't have to decide everything for yourself immediately.
But I would ask you, like, do you feel that somebody else making decisions for you is that more beneficial for you than somebody else literally sitting there and helping you utilize skills to help you make decisions about your own life? And it's not saying that you're going to make perfect decisions all the time, or decisions that you think are the best, or look, in hindsight we can always see 2020. It's saying that people who escape environments like this, or they leave environments like this, they have to be supported and provided with tools to be able to make decisions. So maybe some of that
need to be taught how to. I mean, it's so hard to figure it out yourself. Just figure everything out from.
Applying to high school. Did any of you know how to apply to high school? And you had to get Joe.
That's something I started with before I left the church. I tried to figure it all out on my own, and then I tried to help you guys.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Like, I'll ask her how to enroll my kids in school. I'll ask her.
So
everything.
The thing I learned very quickly before I even left, and I was doing like CNA classes and stuff. Before the CNA, I got my GED, which was very bad too because it was higher education. But I got my GED, I got the CNA, so I got access to computers and the internet and whatever. I started being able to figure things out on my own. So I was able to figure out all those things, figure out resources that typically would not be available. But I don't think, not just anybody wanting to leave will have that opportunity. So it's really hard for people wanting to leave to either have the ability to gain all the information themselves and make all the decisions themselves, or to have somebody there to coach them through it. And I think that's primarily the way people are successful leaving, is if they have someone to help them, coach them through it.
Well, and they need somebody to be in their corner. They need to know that somebody's in their corner, that somebody cares. I don't know about y'all, but for me, the people who were in my corner, who sat there and gave me the space to work through processes and figure out what decisions I wanted to make, even if they didn't agree with those decisions. And I'm very sure they didn't agree with all of those decisions.
I think you're kind of that way with us
sometimes. Sometimes I want to shake you guys.
Yeah.
But I mean,
do it the way I say.
But I mean, like, here's the thing, is like, you have to have the space and the freedom to know that even when you make decisions that the person who's coaching you or supporting you or advocating for you, even when you make decisions that they don't necessarily agree with, that person is still going to be in your corner rooting for you. Like, that's a thing. We have to have the safety to make decisions.
Yeah, you need to start having freedom to make your own decisions and figure it out on your own, while still having someone there as to the consequences, even. And help you figure out how to do it next time.
As Emerald Thunder says, autonomy is definitely a trial and error process of discovery. Yes.
A lot of trial and error.
And you just, like, someday, like 20 years ago, I would make a very different decision today about some things. And in other things, I would make the same decision, because that's so me. Ruth says it has to be acceptable to make mistakes. Yes, I agree. I did want to kind of wrap things up. I wanted to ask each of you, like, if you had anything else you wanted people to know, and if there's somebody listening who perhaps might be inside of a church like that or an environment like that, what would your message to them be?
The biggest thing I say about leaving is if you need to or want to leave a situation, there's gonna be resources and people somewhere. It's just the point of getting connected to them. So the first step is just simply to reach out to someone you know that can maybe help you get connected to whatever resources you might need. Because, I mean, it might be terribly hard and it might be really uncomfortable to actually leave a situation that you're so used to and that you're so, it's just like all you know. It's like really difficult to leave a situation like that. But if you need to, or if you want to, and you feel like there's more out there, there are resources. I mean, I don't know, it might be a hard process sometimes of discovering it, but just reaching out to anybody that can like give you a name, point you in the right direction. The church tries so hard to tell you there's nothing on the outside for you, there's nobody on the outside to help you. But once you actually get out there, you figure out there's a lot more community on the outside than they want you to know. There's just so much more, so many people. So many people that will be there for you. You don't have to believe that the church is the end of that.
That's really beautiful. Thank you, Grace. I think the community aspect is something people often struggle with, and sometimes like it's really helpful for people to know that there's a community of people out here. And you touched upon go ahead.
And that was one reason I think I was a little successful, because I felt like I didn't need that. I was more of a loner. But there's so many people that in those communities, that's like such a huge part of their lives, is just the community, the church community, whatever, their friends, family, they rely so heavily on each other, and it's so hard to break away from that. And you just need to know there's something on the outside. There's people, there's communities on
there's
the outside
people
too.
You can build on it.
Yeah, you can
build
a new community. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard, but it's worth it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. It might be harder, like you might think you're having a hard time on the inside, and then when you get out, you might feel like it gets harder before it gets better, but once it gets better, it's definitely worth it. It gets so much better.
I think just the freedom from judgment is like a huge part of it.
It is, yeah.
That is.
Just not feeling.
Can I ask something?
I mean, you feel it on the outside too a little bit, but just you don't have to care anymore.
Yeah.
Do y'all feel like you lived in constant fear while you were still in the church?
Oh yeah.
You were always judged.
And if you did anything, if you fucked up somewhere, if you did anything a little bit wrong, you were in danger of a preacher's meeting.
Your anxiety spiked. Okay, so I remember when I talked Dutch on Donald Rudolph's van. Was it to you or Kevin?
Yep, you talked to me.
I said something in Dutch, and it was just like that. It was just like, my life is over. I'm done. I'm dead.
Yeah, because they had an issue. Was it just the Rudolphs, or was it some other
just
people
that had an
issue with speaking Dutch around people that could only speak in English?
Yeah. But I remember I even took the battery out of my mom's phone because I knew that they were going to call, and I was like, if I can just
there's just a lot of anxiety.
If I can just have a couple minutes before I do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety about what they're gonna do when I mess up.
Yeah.
Well,
it's so nerve-wracking.
And do you feel that same fear or that same level of fear now that you've escaped?
There are times, depending.
There's still a lot of anxiety. I mean, there's still a holder of that. It's just not the same thing.
You've got more
control over
it. And you can talk yourself out of it. You can be like, okay, well, they aren't here anymore. You don't have to worry about it. Most times. I mean, every so often something happens that you just go crawl into this little shell and you're just like, oh my God, it's the end. But, yeah.
Well, I just want to say this. One of the things that I feel like isn't talked about enough is the way that people respond when people speak in another language except English in front of them and they only speak English. Here's the thing. When English isn't your primary language is often the language that is most familiar and comfortable. And it can slip out even 20 years later in regular course of conversation without like even like trying. It doesn't mean that I'm intentionally excluding other people from the conversation. Rather, it's just that is my language that I grew up. That is the origin. That is part of my origin story. That is part of my life experiences. And so when people speak that in front of other people, what about that makes you so uncomfortable that you have to call Kay Rose's mother to create some kind of reaction to that? Like, I grew up, I learned 3 languages as a child. How many did you learn? How many did you learn?
Oh, she's saying how many did Donald
Yeah.
learn? They learned 1.
Yeah, they always said that over them, you know.
Well, and I think that's one thing that pissed him off.
Well, we were proud of
We were proud of being bilingual. We thought that was cool, and they just couldn't handle that.
Well, I respect your bilingualness. At least I try to. Also, I relate to it because it's like the same one that I speak. So, you know, we have conversations about this. But I also think, like, what does that say about people that it makes them so uncomfortable they have to respond in that manner? And so if somebody out here is experiencing that, I want you to know that just like Kay, Joe, and Grace, like all of us, like we don't deserve to be treated as if speaking in our language that we are most familiar with is the worst sin on the face of the earth, and we've started down the slippery slope of the road to hell. That is not true. You're not going to hell because you speak PH. You're not. There's nothing. Nobody's going to rise up and send you to eternal fire and brimstone because you accidentally spoke in your origin language, in your primary language. Nobody. And for people that are uncomfortable with that, I would just ask you to sit with that uncomfortableness and understand how much effort it takes for us to speak to you and communicate with you in the vernacular of English that you're familiarized with and that you're comfortable with, because that's not our vernacular of English.
Mm-hmm.
And for the people who are also maybe inside of groups where, or families or homes where they feel unsafe and they feel anxious and they might want to leave, like Grace said, like Joe said, like Kay said, there is freedom to be had. You are worthy of that. You deserve to live a meaningful life. And I really want to thank each of our guests for coming on and sharing some of their experiences. This has been a really wonderful conversation to host, and it means a lot to me. But as they said, there are resources, there are people that care, there are places you can go. Reach out to somebody who might be able to connect you with people that will help you get access to escape if you need to. And as always, thank you all for listening, engaging with this content. You can always like, comment, share, subscribe, send messages to our guests and let them know how much you care or what you feel or, some of the things you thought about as they talked. And I'd like to thank our Patreon subscribers for bringing this out here, and everybody at the Misfit Amish for helping us produce this. Art from BJK. As always, BJK is a wonderful, wonderful person. And until next time, live